This one freaked me right out. I was like, when I finished, my heart was just pounding. I was just. Hello, everyone. I am here to give you guys my mid-year wrap-up. I already did the mid-year book freakout tag, which I will show you guys, or I'll put a link to for you guys. But I am also going to do my quarterly wrap-up on my favorite books. So it's quite warm, which is why I'm so red. But I turned the air conditioning off so you guys wouldn't hear it. So anyways, I will tell you my stats first. So this is basically going to cover April, May, and June, because my previous video, which I'll also link, I had January, February, March. And so over April, May, and June, I read 28 books, and I DNF'd 3, which is pretty good for me. I had a couple of really good months there. May, I believe, was my best month. So yeah, May was my best month, and for a number of books, read, number of pages. April was decent. June here, I think I got, what did I get in June? 7? I think it might have been 7. So it's going really well. So for the whole year, I'm up to 50 books, which is really good for halfway through the year. My goal was 75, and I'm definitely on track to break that. So I might have to bump my goal up. So one of the things that I'm tracking for myself is number of rereads, because I tend to be a chronic rereader, but I want to read more new stuff and discover new authors. And so my rereads is still sitting at 20% for the year, which is really good. I was close to that last time. And I have read 20 in the last 3 months. I read 25 fiction and 3 nonfiction, and that is about par for the course. I didn't read as much nonfiction as I did previously in the first quarter, but that was largely because a couple of the nonfictions that I read were quite long. The one that I read about World War II was really long, and some of the other ones that I've read are fairly long. And I haven't been listening to any audiobooks this past 2 months. Or well, I partially listened to some, but I didn't complete any audiobooks. And the ones that I was listening to were mainly fiction, other than the one that I just finished today, which will be in my July stuff. So yeah, I read the 3 nonfiction. And then for my breakdown of age range, I read 28 adult books. This is including my DNFs. It was 28 adult, 2 young adult, and 1 children's book. And the DNFs were all adult books. So, but again, my percentage leans largely to the adult books, which I kind of knew was where I was. I did read 21% or 21 books that I picked, including the DNFs, were off of my shelves. And the other 10 were from the library. So I've been making really good use of my local library, but I've also been getting to those old books on my shelves, which was one of my major goals this year. Like I said, I didn't read any audiobooks. I did partially read some. I got about halfway through Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. And that one, I'm just waiting for the audiobook to come back, because the audiobook was so good. But I ran out of time with Libby. So it had to go back to the library. So I'm waiting for it to come again. I think I'm the next in line for it. So I could have finished the physical book, but I really, really was enjoying the audiobook. So I'm waiting for that. And I listened to about 3/4 of the audiobook of The Fellowship of the Ring, read by Andy Serkis, who played Gollum in the movies. And those movies are some of my all-time favorite movies. So listening to him read the stories with the character voices that he used were so much fun that I wanted to do that. Now it is several months wait to get that book back at the library. I got 3/4 of the way through it, so I am going to finish the physical book, because I have The Two Towers on reserve, and so I'll get that one and read it as well. But I want to finish The Fellowship, of course, first. So that was another one that I partially read. And then I had partially finished How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis, I believe is her name. And that one I got basically halfway done, and then I finished it today actually. So, but that one will not count for the last quarter. Then I read 18 new authors, and 12 were authors that I had read previously. So that was kind of good because, like I said, I'm trying to discover new authors that I enjoy, more current authors. And so 18 of them being new authors to me is really good. 12 was previously read authors. The DNFs are included in there as well, but I can't remember. Whether the DNFs were new authors. I know one of them was for sure, was a new author, but not a new author like age-wise, but a new author to me that I hadn't read before, but I had owned the book for years and years. And then my goal of reading translated books, my goal was to read 12 this year, and I am at 5 now. So I read 2 more translated books in the last quarter, which brings my total up to 5. I read Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. That's a Korean translation. And I read, what was the other translated one? Oh, I read Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sakagawa, I believe was his name. And that one was translated from Japanese. So I'm at 5 now. And so I'm close to being on target. I have one that that I have out from the library that I'll be reading this month for sure. And I'll look for some more to try and keep myself on track. So I'm going to do basically the same kind of thing that I did last time, where I'm going to give you a couple of my honorable mentions, and then I'll tell you about my 5 top ones in no particular order. I'm going to not put the books into an order until the end of the year, so you won't know for sure what my favorite book of the year is. So the honorable mentions that I have were both ones that I gave 4.5 stars to, and they were very, very good, and I definitely enjoyed them and want to read more from, in particular, the author of this one here, The Mysterious Case of the Elperton Angels. This is by Janice Hallett, and this is one of my 4.5 stars that I just really, really enjoyed. This was my first time ever reading a mixed media book, and so that's kind of why it ended up being 4.5, was because it took me a while to get into it because it was my first time reading a mixed media book. And I'll put a link up in the corner as well to the vlog where I read these mixed media books for the very first time, so you can check that out. This story, it follows Amanda Bailey, who is a true crime writer. She's a really famous true crime writer, and she gets hired by this publisher to write a new take on the case of the Elperton Angels. And what that was in 2003, I believe it was, this cult named the Elperton Angels had committed a mass suicide, and there was a murder as well. And there was 2 young teenagers who escaped with this baby. And the baby was, the cult was going to sacrifice the baby because they said it was the Antichrist. And so what Amanda decides to do is her new take on the case, because it's 18 years since it happened at the time. So her new take is she's going to try and find this baby and interview them. But she knows nothing about the baby, doesn't know even its gender or anything. So she sets out to try and track down this baby. She ends up having to kind of be forced to work with this colleague of hers who she hated because of something that he had done to her when they were in school. But she sets out on this adventure. And basically what you're doing is you're following along with all of her notes. So it's transcripts and of interviews, and her general notes and sections out of books and things like that. And so it was really, really good. I gave it 4.5 stars. I didn't see the ending coming. It definitely surprised me, and I want to read more from Janice Hallett. Then my other honorable mention has got to be Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. And this one is translated from Korean. It was translated by Anton Her. And this book, I actually picked it up because he was the translator who translated the BTS book that I love. So, and I had seen this one around, and of course I love rabbits. And so I thought, well, hey, it's got a bunny on the cover. Let's read it. So this is a book of short stories. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars after I averaged my ratings for all the stories. There were some that were really, really weird, and there were some that I really enjoyed. But overall, even the really, really weird ones that I was kind of like confused about, or not like, that were too horrific for me, because it is a horror book of horror short stories and some kind of twisted fairy tales. Even the ones that I found were too weird for my liking were so well written. And what I find is incredible too is that because this is a translated book, sometimes you lose in translation some of the actual feeling of the story, but the translation was done really well to capture the author's writing. Hi, Ollie. So yeah, it was really excellent. I did have a few 5-star stories. My very favorite one was the one called Cursed Bunny, which followed this man. It's a grandfather, and he's sitting there and he's telling this story to his granddaughter, and their family makes cursed objects. And he ended up having a friend of his who his life was torn apart by a capitalist company that pushed the family business out of business. And so he made this cursed lamp that's shaped like a bunny and sends it to this company. And the things that follow are very interesting. I really enjoyed the story, which is really funny because it's like a horror story and, people die and whatever, but I really enjoyed it because of the whole bunny part, because the curse was so bunny-ish. And as you know, I love bunnies. So that was one that I really liked. And the other one that I really loved, and I gave another one that I gave 5 stars to, was called Scars. And that one is quite a long one in the story, or in the book. It goes from, where is it? Here, little tags. Yeah, that one's quite a long one in the book. It was this big story. And it starts with this boy being chained in a cave, and then this monster comes and kind of feeds on the marrow of his bones for years and years. And it's about him growing up and then what happens afterward. And it's kind of a really twisted fairy tale. And, things like, I'm not going to say much because it was a short story, but I just really liked it. And I really kind of liked that character. He was a good character. And yeah, there were some other ones that were really good. Like, I think I gave 5 stars as well to, which one? To Goodbye, My Love. That was kind of a sci-fi sort of story. And I remember I gave 4.5, I think, to The Frozen Finger. That one was just plain creepy, but really good, So yeah, it was really good. And there was a lot of meaning behind the stories. She, uses a lot of symbolism to discuss capitalism and the patriarchy and all that. So I highly recommend it. Just be prepared that some of the stories, especially like the very first one, is really weird. But it's probably the weirdest short story I've ever read. That's called The Head. But like I say, they're still really well written, and there's themes in it that I think are important themes for you to think about. It reminded me of the kind of stories that I would have read in university. And yeah, but I really enjoyed it. So now we'll move on to my top 5. See, I did actually end up with just 5 5-star books over this 3-month period. And so in no particular order, well, actually the order that I'm going to tell you about them in is the order that I read them. So the very first one is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This one, I don't actually have the copy because I took it out from the library, but I want to buy it, and I'm so excited for the sequel that's coming out in July here, or in September, I think, actually. And what this story is it tells a story of Linus Baker, and he works for the Department of, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's the department in charge of magical youth. And in this world, any child who has any sort of magic is taken away and sent to basically an orphanage. And they're raised and kind of taught to control their skills and then if things don't work out, if things are too dangerous, then it's kind of up in the air as to what happens to them. And Linus works for this company, and he's kind of like a social worker, and he is very by the book. He follows all the rules. He knows all the rules off by heart. And so the company ends up sending him to this special orphanage out on this island. And he is supposed to go there, and this is where like the worst cases are. And he's supposed to go there and determine whether it is safe for these children to be kept there or not. And so he goes and heads out there to do that. And he has a cat, this very grumpy cat that is with him. And she's just funny. But he gets there and he meets the headmaster of the orphanage. Arthur Parnassus is his name. And he is like a father to these magical children there. And he looks after them and takes it very seriously. And you learn that there's a lot of prejudice against these magical children. And he's trying to, teach them to control their powers and to understand that they are important and they're not, throwaways. And it's such a good story. And there's a bit of there's romance, there's found family. Just everything about it was just very heartwarming. And I'm really excited about the sequel coming up. So I definitely gave that one 5 stars and really loved it. Then the next one that I read that I gave 5 stars to was this one here, God of Vengeance by Giles Christian. And this is part of his one of his Viking trilogies. And I had actually read this one before a few years ago. And it really sucked me in, but I ended up not reading the other 2 in the trilogy because I have a really bad habit of that. So I decided this year that I was going to try and read the rest of the trilogy. So I reread the first one because it had been, oh, jeepers. I was still working at the power plant at that time. So it had to have been pre-2017 that I read it because that's when I quit out there. So, and the one thing that's funny that I remember about that was I was reading it on my lunch break, and I had my lunch in my office, and I was reading it, and it was at the time when my daughter was in 4-H, and we were selling pizzas for her 4-H club. And so I had put posters up around the plant that I was selling pizzas. And so I'm sitting there and I'm reading away, and I was just like right into it. Like I was in, the 800s in the Viking world, and I was just going. And then one of the cleaning ladies came into my office and asked me about pizza. And I remember like my brain was so in Viking world that I looked up at her and I was like so confused. I was like, pizza? What are you talking about? They didn't have pizza back then. And so it was just really funny. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that this book sucks you in. And it is very crude in the banter and a lot of kind of sexual banter that normally would kind of irritate me, except that it was just, the characters were really good and it was such a good story. I really, really loved the characters, and it's a revenge story. Sigurd is the main character, and he is the son of a jarl, and his father is oath sworn to this king, and then the king betrays his father, and his father and all of his brothers end up getting murdered. This all happens at the very beginning, and he just escapes with his life. And so it's about him and this small group of surviving warriors from his village who set out to get revenge, and they meet up with some other people along the way that join their band. And they're the first book, they're headed out to get revenge on this other jarl who was one of the main causes of the betrayal. And then they're planning on eventually gunning for the king, but they're a small group of Viking warriors right now. And so that's what the story is about. It's, like I say, it really sucks you in. The characters are really good. You really get to feel for Sigurd. And you just, I really enjoyed it. And in spite of, like I say, there is a lot of crude banter. So if you're sensitive to that, just be warned. There's a lot of crude banter in reference to female sexual organs and things. But like I say, the characters are so good that I kind of glossed over that. So anyways, really enjoyed that one. That was one of my 5 stars. The next one was The Dry by Jane Harper. So this one, it takes place in Australia, and it's about Aaron Falk. He is a special agent, federal agent in Australia, and it's the first one in a trilogy again. And he ends up getting called back to the small town that he grew up in, and he left when he was a teenager because his best friend growing up has apparently murdered his wife and son and then killed himself. And so Aaron gets blackmailed into coming back by his friend Luke's father, and then kind of gets talked into trying to find out what actually happened because the father doesn't think that his son did it. And so he ends up sticking around and trying to solve the mystery. Meanwhile, the reason he left the town is because of something that had happened in the past, and there's very hard feelings, and it's in the middle of a huge drought that people are just barely surviving, and there's a lot of tension in the town, and so he's very not welcome there. I really like her writing style, and I liked that it was told with 3 timelines. So you're going along in the main timeline of Aaron in the town trying to solve things. And then you also get scenes from the period just before Luke and his family died. And so you're getting that timeline as well as Aaron finds things out. Then you get to hear the timeline. And then you're also getting scenes from the period when Aaron and Luke and their friends were all teenagers. And that is, you're kind of getting that whole story of why he left and, kind of trying to solve the mystery of something that happened back then as well. So I really enjoyed that pattern of the 3 timelines. The majority of it was in the first timeline with Aaron current time, but then there were these flashback scenes basically, and they were really, really good. And I really enjoyed her writing. I'm looking forward to reading the other 2 in the series, and I'm actually going to read the second one for Summerween, which is Force of Nature. Let me see, it's right up here. Yeah, Force of Nature. That's the second one, and I picked that one because it has kind of a night scene on the cover. So, and that was one of the prompts for Summerween, so I'm going to be reading that one as well. And it also takes place in the summertime, which was another one of the prompts. So, but yeah, so this was really, really high on my list of ones that I really enjoyed, and I definitely want to read everything else that she's written because I just really liked her writing style. And this is the first one that I've read in a long time that takes place in Australia, and so I found the setting to be really cool. I've always kind of liked Australia, so that's one of the places where I would love to travel someday if I ever got a chance to travel. So I really, really enjoyed this one. So the next one, the 4th one that I have is The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell. And this is the first one in a 13-book series, and it is his saga of Uhtred of Bebbanburg. And it takes place this one starts in the 860s, and it starts with Uhtred as a 10-year-old boy, and he lives in the Northumbrian kingdom in what became England. It's when the Danes come and start conquering England. And so they come, and the Northumbrian kings and princes and jarls, and they all bring up their army, and they go to fight the Danes. And they are soundly defeated. And Uhtred's father gets killed, and he is there at the battle as well, and he gets captured by a Danish Viking. But because he shows a lot of courage, the Danish Viking ends up taking a liking to him and basically brings him into his family and raises him. So Uhtred gets raised by the Danes, and he learns learns from them, and becomes a warrior, which is what he wants to do. And then the way that the story takes it goes through his life. This one takes place when he's a teenager, and I think it ends when he's like 19 or 20. And he ends up crossing paths with King Alfred of Wessex, which is the last kingdom that was still standing against the Danes by the time that period was done. And his destiny is basically is entwined with Alfred's. And it ended up being a really, really good book. I want to read the rest of the series. Of course, this time period is one of my all-time favorites. This one was a little bit different than the God of Vengeance one, in that this one is told, you're in the main character's head, and it's from the time when he's it's what's happening right at that moment. Whereas this one is told from Uhtred's point of view, and you're in his head and everything, but when he's a much older man. And so he's remembering the events. And so that was quite different, but it was so well written. Like, I think he might become one of my favorite historical fiction authors. I just really, really enjoyed his writing style and the history, and he made the characters really likable and interesting. Like, the characters weren't flat in any way. And yeah, and of course that time period, like I say, is one of my favorites. So, and then the last one I wanted to talk about is episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. This book I finished reading just a little bit ago for my reading of mixed media books. This one is about a team of paranormal investigators, Matt and Claire Kirkland, and they have a show called Fade to Black, and they get invited to do a ghost hunt, and they're the first team to ever go into this place. It's a derelict old mansion, and it was home to the Paranormal Research Foundation. And that was a group that in like the 60s and 70s was doing experiments in paranormal studies and trying to access our paranormal powers and that sort of science, parascience. And but they get there and they discover that the house is definitely haunted and there's more going on. And it was just such a good adventure. This one freaked me right out. I was like, when I finished, my heart was just pounding. I was so freaked out because I don't read a lot of scary books, and this one really got me. And I really liked the way it was written. He wrote it, and it's all taken from, there's text messages, there's journal entries, and there is transcripts of the raw video footage that was found, and that's what tells the story. And again, this was my third mixed media one, and I really, really enjoyed this one. I think I'm going to read a lot more mixed media because now that I've gotten into it, I'm finding it easier and easier to get into the story. And this one, it was sitting at about a 4.5 star for me until I got to the very end, and the very last scene bumped it up to 5 stars for me because it was really cool. So anyways, I really, really loved this one, and that was one of my 5 stars. So that's the list of the books that I really enjoyed in this last 3-month period. And I will see you guys soon on my next video, and I'll put links to those other videos I mentioned down in the description. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and let me know if you've read any of these books and what your best book of the last 3 months was. And I will see you guys on another video soon. Bye. There is the headmaster of the orphanage, who's Arthur Parnassus is his name. Let me try that again. That sounded really funny. Arthur Parnassus. Arthur Parnassus is his name. And